They say Alpha King Skeldric's soul was carved from permafrost and iron. 9 merciless years, and not a single witness, not the generals who executed his orders, not the diplomats who negotiated at his feet, not even the servants who poured his wine, had seen the northern sovereign show a flicker of warmth. After the Crimson Purge claimed his betrothed and unborn heir in a coordinated strike by southern insurgents, the most calculating ruler in the 5 territories had forgotten what vulnerability tasted like. Then came the night that shattered his perfect control. Through the blood-soaked wasteland of no man's land, a high-born noblewoman in a decimated wedding gown ran barefoot like the hounds of hell were tearing at her shadow. Fleeing a forced mating, escaping a gilded prison wrapped in vows and violence, she crashed through the iron gate of the northern keep, wild-eyed and feral, shredded white silk trailing behind her like a battle standard. She didn't collapse. She didn't plead. She locked eyes with Skeldric and said, "Grant me asylum, or I swear on every god listening, I'll give your enemies a map to every crack in your perfect fortress." And for the first time in 9 years, Alpha King Skeldric smiled. That was the moment the game began. The northern wind howled across the borderlands with savage fury, turning the treacherous stretch of no man's land into a graveyard of ambition and desperation. Snow mixed with ash fell in gray flurries, blanketing the corpses of those who'd tried to cross before. The iron gate rose from the frozen earth like the jaw of some ancient beast, all blackened steel and warning sigils, designed to keep the world out and the North's secrets in. Brisella of the Southern Reach had exactly 4 minutes before they dragged her back in chains. Her bare feet left bloody prints across ice-slicked stone and frozen mud. The wedding gown, 3 generations of Southern nobility stitched into cream silk and seed pearls, her, mother's final gift before the sickness took her, now hung in tattered ribbons, drenched with sleet and splattered with arterial spray. Not her blood. The guard who'd gotten too close at the ceremony. Her throat burned like she'd swallowed broken glass in winter air. Behind her, the howls rose in pitch. Savage. Relentless. Alpha Silas's hunting pack. Silas didn't tolerate defiance. And fleeing your own mating ceremony in front of the entire southern court, leaving your betrothed unconscious on the altar with a shattered jaw, that wasn't just defiance. That was a blood oath of war. Brisella's fingers tightened around the ceremonial blade she'd ripped from the altar cloth. She'd never taken a life before tonight, but desperation was a brutal instructor. The steel was still warm from the guard's body heat. The northern border loomed ahead. Massive iron wrought with wolf motifs tangled in thorn patterns and ancient deterrent runes. Beyond it lay certain death. Everyone knew the stories. The Ice King showed no mercy to refugees, especially not nobles carrying the stench of his greatest political rival. But Brisella had spent 3 years in Silas's war council when he thought she was merely decorative. She'd memorized every treaty violation, every territorial dispute, every festering grudge, and she knew one critical truth. Alpha King Skeldric despised Silas more than he valued protocol. Brisella made her choice. She threw herself against the gate with her full weight, and the instant her skin touched the iron, alarms screamed through the keep. Ancient wards, a trap for the desperate. The gate groaned inward, and suddenly she was stumbling into a torchlit courtyard that looked like it had been carved from winter itself and political intimidation. And there he stood, Alpha King Skeldric. She'd heard the whispered legends in Silas's great hall, the frozen sovereign, the architect of ash, the Alpha who'd watched his pregnant mate and her bloodline slaughtered in a single coordinated strike, and who'd spent 9 years systematically dismantling every faction responsible with surgical, emotionless efficiency. The ruler who'd unified 6 fractious northern territories under one unyielding law. The king who made compassion look like a strategic weakness. But the rumors hadn't prepared her for this. He stood beside a massive warhorse, one gloved hand resting on the beast's scarred neck. 6'4" of calculated menace wrapped in dark leather armor reinforced with steel plates and bone. His hair was silver white, pulled back from a face that looked like it had been chiseled by someone who'd forgotten how to sculpt mercy. Pale eyes the color of a winter storm tracked her every movement with predatory precision. This wasn't a man who ruled through charisma. This was a weapon that had learned to wear a crown. His generals flanked him, 6 warriors in obsidian armor, hands already on their blades. Brisella forced herself, upright, every muscle screaming, blood dripping from her torn feet onto ancient stone. She met his gaze and refused to lower her eyes. Submission meant death, always had. "I am Brisella of the Southern Reach," she said, her voice raw but steady, "and I'm claiming sanctuary under the old laws." The courtyard went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Skeldric tilted his head, studying her like she was a particularly interesting puzzle. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the stone itself. "The old laws haven't been invoked in 73 years. You're well educated for a runaway bride." "I'm well educated because I was never meant to be just a bride." She took one step forward, deliberately leaving a bloody footprint. "I'm a high-ranking member of the Southern Council. I know Silas's troop movements, his supply lines, his alliance fractures. I know which of his generals are loyal and which are cowards. I know exactly how weak he really is." One of the generals shifted. "My lord, she's clearly bait. Silas would never let intelligence this valuable escape." "He didn't let me." Brisella's smile was all edges. "I broke his jaw with a ceremonial wine pitcher and stabbed my way through his perimeter. He's not known for his contingency planning when his ego's involved." Something flickered in Skeldric's expression. Not warmth. Something more dangerous. Interest. He took 3 measured steps toward her, and Brisella forced herself not to retreat. Predators chased what ran. "You're a long way from the altar, Lady Brisella," he said quietly, his winter storm eyes locked on hers. "But you've made a fundamental miscalculation." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Have I?" "You assumed I collect refugees." He gestured, and his guards moved forward with practiced efficiency. "I don't. In the South, you are going to be a wife. In the North, you're a strategic asset." His smile was the coldest thing she'd ever seen. "Guards, escort our high-value prisoner to the tower. Full security protocols. She's not to leave her chambers without my explicit authorization." "I claimed sanctuary, and I'm granting you protection from Silas." Skeldric's voice cut through her protest like a blade through silk. "Your life is safe here. Your freedom, however, was never part of the negotiation." As iron manacles closed around her wrists and the guards began leading her toward the fortress's highest tower, Brisella didn't scream. She didn't weep. She turned her head and stared directly at Alpha King Skeldric, her amber eyes burning with something that looked less like fear and more like calculation. "You think you've captured a prize," she said, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "But you should ask yourself something, Your Majesty." Skeldric raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "In this cage you're building, who's really the prisoner?" And as the tower door slammed shut behind her, Alpha King Skeldric stood in the falling snow, still smiling that rare, dangerous smile. The game had begun. Keeping you close to this channel for more gripping stories like this one, is my priority. Kindly tell me the city you're watching from and share your thoughts in the comment below, and don't forget to subscribe now so we can continue the story. The mirror shatters against stone at precisely the moment Brisella discovers the first hidden mechanism. Glass explodes across marble floor in a constellation of silver fragments, and she doesn't flinch. Her bleeding knuckles, still raw from the altar, still aching from the guard's jaw, throb in rhythm with her pulse as she stares at the tiny lens embedded in the gilded frame, watching, recording, reporting back to him. The tower suite is obscene in its luxury. Silk tapestries the color of winter dawn, a canopied bed draped in furs that cost more than her mother's entire estate, crystal, decanters filled with wine she won't touch, a bathing chamber with heated water that runs clear and endless, but the windows are reinforced with iron lattice welded from the inside. The door is 6 inches of solid oak banded with steel. The servants who bring her meals won't meet her eyes. A prison is still a prison, even when it smells like jasmine and imported incense. She has 12 hours before Silas realizes where she is, maybe less. Brisella moves to the second tapestry, an intricate scene of northern wolves hunting beneath a blood moon, and runs her fingers along the stitching until she finds it. Another lens. Smaller, positioned to capture the bathing chamber entrance. Her stomach twists, but her face remains carved stone. She's performed for audiences before. This is just another stage. Clever, she whispers to the empty room, to the man she knows is watching from somewhere in this fortress. But not clever enough. The silence that follows tastes like a held breath. She counts the mechanisms as she searches. 3rd lens behind the ornate candelabra. 4th embedded in the headboard itself, angled toward the bed. He's not just studying her movements, he's cataloging her patterns, sleep cycles, stress responses, weaknesses. 2 can play that game. Brisella strips the shredded wedding gown from her body with deliberate slowness, letting the ruined silk pool at her feet like shed skin. She steps into the bath naked and unashamed, scrubbing 3 borders worth of blood and mud from her skin while staring directly at the lens above the copper basin. Let him watch. Let him see that she doesn't break. The water turns rust red around her feet. When she emerges, she wraps herself in the darkest robe she can find, midnight blue edged in silver thread, and begins her own surveillance. She tests the door. Locked. The windows. Sealed. She examines every book on the mahogany shelf, every painting on the wall, searching for the pattern she knows must exist. Men, like Skeldric, don't act without calculation. This isn't imprisonment, it's an experiment. The knock comes at hour 6. Lady Brisella. The voice is female, controlled. The Alpha King requests your presence. Her heart hammers against her ribs like something trapped and desperate, but when she opens the door, her expression is glacier calm. The woman standing there is 50, maybe 55, with steel gray hair bound in a severe braid and eyes that have witnessed executions. How kind of His Majesty to request rather than command, Brisella says, stepping into the corridor flanked by 4 armed guards. Does he request his prisoners often, or am I special? The woman's mouth twitches, almost a smile. You'll find out soon enough. They descend through corridors that smell of stone and snow and old violence. Torches cast dancing shadows across walls carved with territorial maps and battle victories. Every door they pass is reinforced. Every window is narrow. This isn't just a fortress. It's a monument to paranoia. The throne room doors open like the jaws of a beast. Skeldric sits on a throne of black iron and bone, one leg crossed over the other, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Those winter storm eyes track her entrance with the focus of a predator sizing up prey. 6 generals stand at attention on either side. The massive war horse from the courtyard stands behind him, still saddled, steam rising from its flanks. He hasn't changed clothes, hasn't rested. He's been awake this entire time, watching her, waiting. Lady Brisella. His voice fills the chamber like rolling thunder. I hope you found your accommodations acceptable. She walks forward until she's 10 paces from the throne, close enough to see the old scars on his knuckles, far enough to run if she needs to. I found them enlightening, Your Majesty. You have excellent taste in surveillance equipment. The generals shift. Skeldric's expression doesn't change. I'm a careful man, he says, quietly. You're a terrified man, she corrects, and the room goes deadly silent. Terrified of being vulnerable again. Terrified of missing the threat before it strikes. Terrified that somewhere in this fortress, someone is planning your death. One of the generals reaches for his blade. Skeldric raises one finger. The man freezes. And what? Skeldric says, leaning forward slightly. Makes you think you understand my fears, little wolf? Brisella smiles, and it's all sharp edges. Because I counted 4 surveillance lenses in my chamber, but you missed the 5th. She pulls something from her robe pocket. A tiny glass lens, cracked but functional, wrapped in silk thread. Hidden in the air vent, positioned to capture anyone who might enter my room without your knowledge. You're not just watching me, Your Majesty. You're watching your own people, your own guards, your own generals. The throne room could hear a snowflake fall. So here's what's going to happen, Brisella continues, taking 3 steps closer. You're going to stop pretending I'm just a prisoner, and I'm going to stop pretending I don't know exactly what you need. And what? Skeldric says very softly. Do I need? She meets his pale gaze without blinking. Someone you can't afford to lose. The Alpha King stares at her for 7 endless heartbeats. Then he smiles, that rare, dangerous smile. Guards, he says, leave us. What secrets will Brisella reveal in their first private negotiation? The answer will cost both of them more than they're ready to pay. The knife embeds itself in the map exactly where Silas's war camp sits. Brisella doesn't wait for permission. She strides past Skeldric's throne to the massive tactical table dominating the western wall, her bare feet silent against cold stone, and drives the blade through the southern reach's most fortified position. The generals behind her inhale sharply. Skeldric remains motionless, but his eyes track every movement like a wolf watching a deer that's forgotten to run. You want military intelligence? She says, fingers still wrapped around the hilt. But you're asking the wrong questions. The war room smells of old leather and melted wax and male certainty. 3 maps overlap on the table: territorial, topographical, political. Red markers indicate known enemy positions. Black markers show supply routes. None of them are accurate. She can see it in the dated notations. The assumptions that stopped being true 6 months ago, when Silas executed his logistics commander for incompetence. Skeldric rises from his throne, descending the dais with the deliberate patience of a predator closing distance. He stops on the opposite side of the table, close enough that she can see the silver threading through his white hair, close enough to smell winter and steel and something darker. Authority. Control. Enlighten me, he says softly. Brisella pulls the knife free and spins the map 90 degrees. You've marked Silas's main encampment here, at the Crow's Nest Pass. You're wrong. He moved it 4 weeks ago to the Hollow Vale after your scouts compromised his eastern flank. He's paranoid about aerial reconnaissance now. One of the generals steps forward, a scarred brute with gray streaking his beard. That's impossible. We have daily reports. You have what Silas wants you to have. She doesn't look at the general, keeps her eyes locked on Skeldric. He's feeding your scouts false intelligence through controlled leaks, the camp you're watching. It's a decoy staffed with conscripts and supply runners. The real force is here. She stabs the map again, 3 inches northwest. Hidden in the mining valleys, where your birds can't see through the fog. The silence stretches like a bowstring pulled to breaking. Skeldric leans forward, palms flat against the table's edge. And you know this how? Because I designed the disinformation strategy. Her smile is razor thin. Silas thinks women are decoration. So, I decorated his war councils for 3 years while memorizing everything that mattered. She could be lying, the scarred general growls, feeding us false information to protect her former nothing, Brisella snaps, finally turning to face him. Silas shattered my mother's fingers one by one when she refused to sign the mating contract. Then he made me watch while he burned her journals. The man you think I'm protecting is the reason I sleep with a knife under my pillow. Her hands shake. Just slightly. Just enough to be real. Skeldric notices. He notices everything. Leave us, he says quietly. The generals hesitate. The scarred one opens his mouth to protest. Now. The door closes with a hollow boom that echoes through vaulted stone. Now it's just the 2 of them, separated by maps and mistrust and the sharp awareness that they're playing a game where losing means death. You have 48 hours, Skeldric says, circling the table slowly, before Silas mobilizes his full force to retrieve you. I need troop numbers, patrol rotations, weak points in his defensive perimeter. And what do I get? Brisella counters, matching his movement, keeping the table between them. Better accommodations, freedom to walk the battlements, a promise you won't hand me over the moment negotiations turn favorable. He stops, studies her. You're negotiating your own interrogation? I'm establishing terms of engagement. She places both palms on the map, mirroring his earlier stance. You want me broken and compliant, but broken prisoners give useless intelligence. They tell you what you want to hear just to make the pain stop. I don't torture women. His voice drops to something dangerous. No, you just lock them in gilded cages and watch them through hidden lenses while you decide their worth. She leans forward an inch. That's not torture. That's cowardice dressed in strategy. The air between them crackles like lightning before the strike. Skeldric closes the distance in 3 measured steps. Now only the table's width separates them. She can see the old grief carved into the lines around his mouth, the sleepless nights shadowed beneath his eyes, the rigid control he maintains over every muscle, every breath. Here's what I'm offering, she says before he can respond. I'll give you everything I know about Silas's military operations, troop movements, supply vulnerabilities, the names of generals who are 1 insult away from defection. But in return, you give me 3 things. His jaw tightens. I don't negotiate with prisoners. You do now. She counts on her fingers. 1. I train with your warriors. I won't survive what's coming if I can't defend myself. 2. I attend your war councils. I'm more useful in the room than locked in a tower. 3. You stop watching me like I'm a laboratory rat and start treating me like an intelligence asset. And if I refuse? Her smile could cut glass. Then in 48 hours, when Silas comes, you'll realize you've been planning for the wrong war. The clock on the wall ticks 30 seconds into the growing silence. Skeldric's expression remains carved stone, but something shifts behind his winter storm eyes. Calculation. Reassessment. The slow recognition that she's not prey, she's a player. Done, he finally says. But you train under my personal guard captain. You attend councils under armed escort. And if you betray me, I won't. If you betray me, he continues, voice dropping to a lethal whisper, I'll hand you back to Silas with a signed confession detailing every secret you've sold. Brisella extends her hand across the map. Deal. He stares at her offered palm for 3 heartbeats. Then he takes it. His grip is iron and calluses and barely leashed strength. Neither of them lets go. Their first training session will draw blood, but whose remains to be seen, keep watching. Brisella's hand shoots across the table and slaps the wine goblet from Skeldric's lips. Crystal shatters against stone floor in an explosion of Bordeaux and glass shards, the sound deafening in the sudden silence of the great hall. 60 nobles freeze mid-conversation, forks suspended over roasted pheasant and honey-glazed venison. Skeldric's hand goes to the blade at his hip, his eyes locked on hers with lethal focus, wine dripping from his beard like dark blood. Bitter almonds, she says quietly, her voice cutting through the shock. I can smell it from here. The server who poured the wine, a young man with nervous hands and a fresh scar across his left cheek, takes 1 step backward, then another. His fingers tremble as they drift toward something hidden in his servant's tunic. Seize him, Skeldric commands, his voice like winter wind through a graveyard. The guards move, but the servant is faster. He pulls a vial from his pocket and hurls it at the high table. Glass explodes midair as Brisella throws herself sideways, tackling Skeldric from his chair as liquid fire sprays across where his head was 3 seconds ago. They hit the floor hard, her body covering his, her fingers already reaching for the knife strapped to her thigh. The servant runs. Brisella rolls off Skeldric and launches after him, bare feet finding purchase on blood-slicked stone as chaos erupts behind her. Nobles scream. Chairs overturn. The guards are too slow, weighed down by ceremonial armor and shock, but she's spent 3 years learning to navigate banquet halls in restrictive gowns, and she knows exactly where servants disappear. The kitchen corridor. Left side. Behind the wine cellar. She catches him at the servants' entrance, driving her shoulder into his spine and sending them both crashing through the wooden door into the snow-covered courtyard beyond. Cold bites through the silk dinner gown she'd been forced to wear, midnight blue edged in silver, another cage dressed as luxury. They roll across ice, and she gets the knife to his throat before he can draw, whatever weapon he's hiding. Who sent you? She presses the blade hard enough to draw a thin line of red. Answer fast, or I'll let you bleed slow. His eyes are wild with terror and something else. Resignation. You're already dead, he gasps. You both are. The poison was just insurance. The real strike comes in 7 minutes. Her blood turns to ice water. What real strike? But he's already biting down. She hears the crack of the false tooth, smells the bitter almond intensifying, and jerks back as foam bubbles from his mouth. He convulses once, twice, then goes still, eyes fixed on the winter stars above. Footsteps thunder behind her. Skeldric emerges from the doorway, 6 guards flanking him, his hand still on his blade. His pale eyes assess the corpse, then her, kneeling in snow in a ruined dinner gown, knife in hand, breathing hard. 7 minutes, she says, rising to her feet on legs that want to shake but don't. He said the real strike comes in 7 minutes. The poison was a distraction. Skeldric's jaw tightens. He turns to his scarred general. Full lockdown. Search every room, every corridor, every... The explosion tears through the eastern wing. Stone and fire erupt into the night sky. shockwaves rolling across the courtyard and knocking nobles who'd fled outside to their knees. Brisella's ears ring as debris rains down. Chunks of masonry, burning timber, shattered glass that glitters like deadly snow. The great hall's eastern wall collapses inward, and through the smoke and flame, she can see the tactical room they'd stood in just hours ago. The maps, the intelligence, everything. Gone. Skeldric's expression doesn't change, but his knuckles go white around his blade's hilt. The war room. Not just assassination, Brisella realizes, her mind racing through tactical possibilities. They wanted your intelligence destroyed. Someone knew exactly what I gave you, someone in your inner circle. He turns to face her fully, and for the first time, since she crashed through his gates, she sees something raw beneath the ice. Fury, betrayal, the terrible confirmation of a fear he's carried for 9 years. "There's a spy in my court," he says quietly. "There's always been a spy in your court," she corrects. "You just gave them a reason to act." The guards surrounding them shift uncomfortably. Every face is suddenly suspect. Every loyal servant could be an enemy. Every trusted general might be the blade aimed at his back. Skeldric's eyes narrow as he studies her. "You knew. When you smelled the poison, you knew it wasn't about killing me. It was about chaos, creating an opening. I spent 3 years watching Silas orchestrate this exact strategy." She wipes her blade clean on her ruined gown. Distract with the obvious threat while the real danger slips through unnoticed. The question is, who here is desperate enough or stupid enough to work for him? "Everyone in this courtyard just watched you save my life," he says, his voice carrying an edge she can't quite identify. Suspicion? Gratitude? Calculation? "I saved my own life," she corrects flatly. "You die. Silas takes the north within a month. Silas takes the north. I'm dragged back in chains and broken as an example. Your survival is my survival. Don't mistake pragmatism for loyalty." Silence falls between them like fresh snow. 30 seconds. 45. The fire behind them crackles and roars. "My chambers," Skeldric finally says. "Now, we need to determine who knew about today's intelligence transfer." "Your chambers?" Her eyebrow arches. "That's not exactly protocol for a prisoner." His smile is sharp and cold and almost amused. "You stopped being just a prisoner the moment you threw yourself in front of an assassin's blade. Consider yourself promoted to conspiracy investigator." He turns and strides toward the inner keep, guards forming a protective circle around him. After 3 steps, he pauses and looks back. "Are you coming, Lady Brisella? Or would you prefer to freeze to death in that inadequate gown while Silas's spy prepares their next move?" She looks down at herself, silk soaked with snow and blood, bare feet already numb, knife still warm in her hand. Then she looks at the burning war room, at the dead servant with foam on his lips, at the 60 nobles who now know her face and her value. The countdown clock in her head resets. 47 hours until Silas mobilizes. 1 spy somewhere in this fortress. 0 margin for error. Brisella sheathes her knife and follows the Alpha King into the darkness. In Skeldric's private chambers, Brisella will discover that some secrets are more dangerous than any assassin's blade. "Stay tuned." The practice sword catches Brisella across the ribs with a crack that steals her breath. She hits frozen earth hard, tasting copper and dirt, her vision swimming as pain explodes through her side. Above her, the morning sun burns cold and merciless through winter clouds. Around her, 60 warriors form a silent circle, their faces carved from stone and judgment. The guard captain, a woman called Thyra with arms like corded steel and a scar bisecting her left eye, stands over her with the blunted training blade still raised. "Get up," Thyra says. No sympathy, no patience. Brisella's fingers dig into frost-hardened ground. Her lungs scream for air that won't come. 3 ribs cracked, maybe 4. She's been on this training ground for 90 minutes and hasn't landed a single blow. "Get up." She gets up. Her legs shake as she retrieves her own practice sword, 6 pounds of weighted wood designed to build strength she doesn't have. Blood trickles from her split lip where the last strike caught her mouth. Her hands are raw and blistered beneath makeshift wraps. The borrowed training leathers hang loose on her frame, meant for warriors twice her size. Thyra circles her like a wolf assessing prey. "You're noble trained. All pretty footwork and ceremonial forms. That'll get you killed in 2 seconds against real threat." "Then teach me real threat," Brisella manages through gritted teeth. Thyra's response is another strike, low sweep aimed at the knees. Brisella barely dodges, her counterswing so clumsy it wouldn't threaten a child. The warriors watching murmur among themselves. She catches fragments. "Waste of time. Soft southern blood. Dead in a week." The next strike comes high. She blocks. Her arms go numb from the impact. 43 hours, Thyra says, pressing forward with mechanical precision, each blow designed to test a different defense. "That's how long until Silas reaches the northern border. When he comes, he won't send polite soldiers with blunted blades. He'll send beasts who learn to kill before they learn to walk." Strike to the shoulder. Block too slow. Another bruise. "And they won't be impressed that you memorized supply routes or played politics in war councils." Strike to the hip. Brisella stumbles but keeps her feet. "They'll smell your fear and tear you apart while you're still trying to negotiate terms of engagement." "Then stop!" Brisella swings wild, desperate, "talking and actually teach me something." Thyra catches her blade mid-swing and twists. The practice sword flies from Brisella's grip, spinning through cold air before embedding in dirt 15 feet away. Before she can react, Thyra sweeps her legs. Her back hits earth again, and this time the guard captain's boot plants firmly on her chest, pinning her. "Lesson 1, Thyra says, pressing down just enough to make breathing difficult. "Stop fighting like you're afraid to get hurt. You're already hurt. Use it." Silence rings across the training ground. 30 seconds. 45. Brisella stares up at the woman crushing her lungs and makes her choice. She grabs Thyra's ankle with both hands and twists hard, throwing her full weight sideways in a move that's probably wrong and definitely reckless. Thyra's balance breaks. She staggers, just for a heartbeat. Brisella rolls, ignoring the ribs that grind together like broken glass, and sweeps out hard at Thyra's planted foot. The guard captain goes down. Not far, not gracefully, but down. The warrior's silence shifts. Someone whispers something that sounds like approval. Thyra rises, brushing frost from her leathers, and for the first time since this torture began, she almost smiles. Again. They go again, and again, and again. By hour 4, Brisella can't feel her hands. By hour 5, she's vomiting into the snow from exhaustion. By hour 6, when the training finally ends, she's landed 3 solid hits. Clumsy, desperate strikes that Thyra could have dodged but chose not to. The warriors disperse, heading for warm fires and hot food. Brisella remains on her knees in the dirt, arms trembling with muscle failure, every breath a reminder that she's not built for this world. Footsteps approach, slow, measured. She doesn't need to look up to know. "You lasted longer than I expected," Skeldric says quietly. He's been watching from the battlements, all 6 hours. "I'm full of surprises." Her voice is gravel and defiance. She forces herself to stand, swaying slightly, meeting his winter storm eyes. Same time tomorrow? Something flickers in his expression. Not pity. Something more dangerous. Respect. Tomorrow you fight two opponents, he says. Then he turns and walks away, leaving her bleeding and battered and still standing. Thyra appears beside her, offering a water skin. You're going to die horribly when they come, she says matter-of-factly, but at least you'll die standing. Brisella drinks. The water tastes like iron and ice and small victories. Good enough, she whispers. But as Brisella earns the North's grudging respect, Silas sends a message that will shatter what little peace she's found. Lets us discover what the message is. Stay tuned. The box arrives at dawn wrapped in white silk that's already soaking through with red. Brisella is crossing the courtyard from the bathhouse, her muscles still screaming from yesterday's training, when the gates grind open and a rider appears. Not one of Silas's men. Too clean, too composed. A messenger under flag of truce, his face carefully neutral as he presents the silk-wrapped parcel to the gate guards. The package is small, maybe 12 inches across, light enough to carry with one hand, light enough to be a head. Her feet stop moving. The morning air tastes like ash and coming snow and something else. Dread. Recognition. Skeldric emerges from the war council chamber, Thyra and 3 generals flanking him, already dressed for the day's strategy sessions. His pale eyes lock onto the messenger, then the box, then Brisella frozen 20 paces away. He says something low to Thyra. She nods and moves toward the package. Don't open it, Brisella hears herself say. Her voice sounds distant, hollow. Thyra's hands pause on the silk. Why not? Because I know what's inside. The words scrape her throat raw. And once you open it, 36 hours becomes now. Skeldric crosses the courtyard in long strides, snow crunching beneath his boots. He stops beside her, close enough that she can smell leather and steel and the cold that clings to him like second skin. Explain. It's from Silas. Her fingers dig into her palms hard enough to draw blood. He sends gifts when he wants to break someone. Psychological warfare. He did it to the Western territories before he invaded, sent them pieces of their captured soldiers, 1 body part per day, until they surrendered without a fight. The messenger speaks, his voice carrying across the courtyard. The Alpha of the Southern Reach sends his regards to the Lady Brisella. He wishes her to know that all debts must be paid, all stolen property must be returned. Skeldric's jaw tightens. Open it. My lord, Thyra begins. Open it. Thyra unwraps the silk with careful hands. The fabric falls away like shed. Skin, revealing a simple wooden box bound with iron hinges. She lifts the lid. The smell hits first, preservation oils and decay and something floral. Lilies. The same flowers that lined the altar at Brisella's forced mating ceremony. Thyra's expression doesn't change, but her knuckles go white around the box edge. She turns it so Skeldric can see inside. He looks. His eyes narrow fractionally. Then he looks at Brisella. Do you know this person? She forces herself to move forward. 5 steps. 10. Until she's close enough to see into the box, though every instinct screams to run, to hide, to unsee what she knows is waiting. Master Kalen stares up at her with sightless eyes. The man who taught her to read, who smuggled her books when her father said education was wasted on daughters, who whispered that she was meant for more than breeding contracts and political alliances, who helped her plan the escape, who gave her the ceremonial knife, who promised he'd follow 3 days behind. Once the chaos settled, his gray beard is matted with blood. His mouth is frozen open mid-scream, and carved into his forehead with meticulous precision. Thief. The courtyard tilts. Brisella's knees unlock. Skeldric catches her arm before she falls, his grip iron and oddly gentle, but she barely registers the touch. All she can see is Kaelin's face, his kind eyes that used to crinkle when he smiled, now dull and accusatory and dead because of her. 36 hours, the messenger says, his tone professionally detached. The Alpha will arrive at your gates with his full war host. He requests the return of his stolen bride, unharmed, or he will take her from your corpses and burn the north to ash as payment for your insolence. Silence falls like a blade. 15 seconds. 30. 45. Brisella tears her gaze from the box and looks at the messenger. Her voice comes out steady, carved from ice and rage and grief she can't afford to feel yet. Tell Silas that his bride died the moment she crossed the border. Tell him that the woman standing here is no one's property. And tell him, her fingers close around the knife at her belt, that if he wants to collect his debt, I'll be waiting at the gates with a blade that remembers his blood. The messenger's neutral expression cracks slightly. Fear. Just a flicker. Skeldric releases her arm. You'll relay her message word for word, he says to the messenger, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. And you'll add one more thing. The North does not negotiate with men who butcher the elderly. When Silas arrives, he'll find us ready. The messenger bows stiffly, remounts his horse, and rides through the gates that slam shut behind him with grim finality. The box remains open on the snow. Kaelin's head rests among white lilies, a grotesque centerpiece to Silas's message. Brisella stares at it for 3 heartbeats, memorizing every detail, cataloging the grief to weaponize later. Then she walks away. Not to her tower chamber, not to the training grounds. She walks to the battlements, to the northern wall where she can see the horizon, where Silas's army will appear in 36 hours like a plague of locusts. Skeldric follows. She hears his measured footsteps behind her, feels his presence like winter's approach, inevitable and inescapable. He died because of me, she says to the wind, to the mountains, to the gods who clearly aren't listening. Kaelin helped me escape, and Silas made him pay for it. Yes, Skeldric agrees. No comfort, just truth. He'll do it again. Her hands grip the stone rampart until her knuckles go white. He'll kill everyone who helped me. My lady's maid, the stable boy who saddled my horse, the guard who looked away when I ran. He'll butcher them all and send me their pieces until I break. Probably. She turns to face him, this man who captures refugees and calls them prisoners, who watches wars unfold like chess matches, who hasn't smiled in 9 years, until she crashed through his gates. Then we kill him first. Skeldric studies her for a long moment. Then his rare, dangerous smile appears. Now you're thinking like a queen. Behind them, Thyra barks orders to prepare the defenses. Soldiers scramble to positions. The war drums begin their slow, steady rhythm, a countdown clock made of sound and fury. 36 hours until everything ignites. In the war room, Brisella and Skeldric will forge a plan that crosses every line. But some weapons, once drawn, can never be sheathed. What is the plan? Brisella is 3 miles into the frozen forest when she hears the hoofbeats behind her. She doesn't slow. Her lungs burn with each gasping breath, frost crystallizing on her lips as she crashes through snow-heavy pine branches that claw at her stolen cloak. The guard uniform she's wearing, taken from a laundry line in the servants' quarters, hangs loose on her frame, the leather armor chafing against bruises that haven't healed from training. Her feet are wrapped in rags inside boots 2 sizes too large. Every step is agony. Every step takes her farther from the fortress, farther from the trap she walked into like a fool. The hoofbeats grow louder, closer, singular. One rider, not a patrol. Him. She pushes harder, her thighs screaming as she fights through a snowdrift that rises to her knees. The forest is a maze of white and shadow, ancient pines standing like silent sentinels watching her desperation. Dawn is still 2 hours away. She has maybe 20 minutes before the shift change reveals her absence. 20 minutes before every warrior in the north descends on these woods. The horse cuts her off. Skeldric's black warhorse erupts from the tree line ahead, blocking her path with 1,200 pounds of muscle and barely restrained violence. The beast's breath comes in great plumes of steam. Its eyes roll white with exertion, and atop it, dressed in dark leather and winter fury, sits the Alpha King. He's not wearing armor, just riding leathers and the sword at his hip. His silver-white hair is loose, whipping in the wind that cuts through the forest like a living blade. Those winter storm eyes find hers across 15 feet of snow and broken trust. "Running again," he says quietly. His voice carries despite the wind. "You do have patterns, Lady Brisella." She draws the knife from her belt, the ceremonial blade she's carried since the altar, since Kaelin gave it to her, since everything shattered. Her hand shakes, from cold or fear or rage, she can't tell anymore. "Stay back!" He dismounts in one fluid motion, his boots hitting snow with barely a sound. The horse stands perfectly still, trained for war and patience. Skeldric doesn't reach for his sword, doesn't call for the guards she knows must be searching these woods. He just stands there, watching her like she's a puzzle that's finally revealed its solution. "I heard you," she says, the words tumbling out raw and jagged. "In the war room 3 hours ago, I heard you tell your generals that you'd consider Silas's terms, that a trade might be the only way to avoid total war." The silence that follows tastes like betrayal. 10 seconds. 20. 30. "You were eavesdropping," he finally says. Not a question. A statement carved from ice. "I was surviving!" Her voice cracks. "I've spent my entire life learning to read the subtext, to hear what men don't say, to know when I'm about to be sold like livestock. And I heard you, Skeldric. I heard you say that my intelligence value might not outweigh a kingdom. You heard half a conversation." He takes one step forward. She retreats 2. "You heard me present options to my council, not decisions." "It's always options until it isn't." Her back hits a pine tree, bark rough through the stolen cloak. "You captured me. You imprisoned me. You've been using me from the start. For intelligence, for strategy, for whatever political game you're playing. Why would trading me be any different?" Another step closer. She raises the knife. He stops. "Because you saved my life," he says, his voice dropping to something that's almost gentle and infinitely more dangerous. "At the poisoned feast, you threw yourself between me and an assassin's vial without hesitation. You didn't negotiate. You didn't calculate the cost. You just moved. I told you that was pragmatism, self-preservation. It was instinct." Another step. The knife trembles in her grip. "And instinct doesn't lie, Brisella. Whatever you think I am, whatever you believe about my intentions, your body knew the truth in that moment. You trust me." "I don't trust anyone." The words tear from her throat like shrapnel. "Trust gets you killed. Trust gets the people you love decapitated and delivered in boxes. Trust is a luxury I buried with my mother when Silas broke her fingers one by one until she signed my life away." Skeldric goes perfectly still. The wind dies. Even the forest seems to hold its breath. 12 hours, he says quietly. "You have 12 hours before Silas arrives at the gates. If you run now, you'll freeze to death before dawn. If you survive the cold, his trackers will find you by midday. And when they do, everything Kaelin died for everything you fought for, ends with you in chains, being dragged back to that altar. Better chains I choose than a cage I'm gifted. But her conviction wavers. Her fingers ache from gripping the knife. The cold is already seeping through her stolen uniform, through her skin, into her bones. "I'm not trading you," Skeldric says, and something in his voice makes her look up, makes her meet those pale eyes that have watched empires crumble. "I was presenting options to give my generals the illusion of control, but the moment you stepped into my war room with intelligence that could save thousands of lives, the moment you trained until you vomited blood, the moment you stared at your mentor's severed head and chose vengeance over collapse, you stopped being a bargaining chip." The silence stretches. 45 seconds. A minute. "Then what am I?" she whispers. He closes the distance between them in 2 strides. His hand covers hers on the knife, not forcing it away, just holding it steady. His palm is warm against her frozen fingers. "You're the woman who's going to help me burn Silas's army to ash. You're the strategist who knows his weaknesses better than his own generals. You're the survivor who refuses to stay broken." He pauses. "And if you try to run again, I will hunt you down. Not to trade you, not to cage you, to drag you back here and force you to fight for the life you deserve instead of the death you think you've earned." Her breath catches. The knife falls from her grip, disappearing into snow. "I heard you say my value might not outweigh a kingdom," she says, her voice barely audible. "And you didn't stay to hear me tell my generals that some things are worth more than kingdoms." His thumb traces the pulse point at her wrist. "Come back, Brisella. Face this with me, not as my prisoner, as my ally." The forest waits. The cold presses in. 12 hours until everything ends or begins. She looks at him, this king who smiles like winter and captures refugees and hasn't let anyone close in 9 years. Then she looks back the way she came, toward freedom that's really just another form of death. "If you betray me," she says finally, "I will destroy you." His rare smile appears. "I'd expect nothing less." He offers his hand. After a 5-second eternity, she takes it. They ride back toward the fortress together through the pre-dawn darkness, and neither of them mentions that she's gripping his waist like he's the only solid thing in a world that won't stop shifting beneath her feet. But in the war room, a revelation awaits that will rewrite everything Brisella thought she knew about captivity, prophecy, and the real reason Skeldric can never let her go. What could be that? Revelation? The ancient scroll unfurls across the war table like a death sentence written in dead languages. Brisella stares at the parchment, so old it's nearly transparent, covered in symbols that look like claw marks and desperate prayers, and feels the ground shift beneath her feet. They're alone in the war room, the door barred, every surveillance lens deliberately covered. Outside, dawn breaks over the northern mountains. Inside, Skeldric's pale eyes watch her face with the intensity of a man about to shatter someone's world. "Read it," he says quietly. She leans closer, her fingers hovering over text that predates the 5 territories by centuries. The language is old realm, barely taught anymore, considered superstition by modern courts. But her mother made her learn it, insisted, as if she knew. "When the blood of the Southern Star crosses the Iron Gate," Brisella reads slowly, her voice steady despite the tremor starting in her hands, "the ancient Aegis shall wake. Only her lineage can break the chains of the sleeping guardian. Only her sacrifice can—" Her breath catches. "Can shield the north from the darkness that hungers." Silence falls like a blade. 10 seconds, 20, 30. "Keep reading," Skeldric says. His knuckles are white where they grip the table's edge. The Bloodstone cult seeks the star's daughter. They will hunt her through lifetimes. They will corrupt kings and topple kingdoms to claim her. For if the guardian wakes without the star's consent, the world ends in ice and screaming. She looks up. This is folklore, ancient paranoia. It's prophecy. He pulls a second document from beneath the first, newer, dated 3 months before her forced mating ceremony. From my intelligence network, the Bloodstone cult isn't folklore. They're real. They've been operating in the Southern Reach for decades, and 9 years ago, they approached me with an offer. Her throat goes dry. What offer? They knew about my pregnant mate, knew the assassination was coming, said they'd protect her if I helped them locate the Southern Star's bloodline. His voice is carved from permafrost and old grief. I refused. So they let her die and took my unborn heir as punishment. The room tilts. Brisella grips the table to keep from falling. You think I'm... Your mother was Lady Celeste of the Southern Star House. He slides a third document across, a bloodline chart with her name at the bottom of a golden line. The last surviving member of the oldest bloodline in the 5 territories. The cult has been trying to capture you for years. Silas didn't choose you randomly for that mating ceremony. He was paid to secure you. No. But the word has no strength. Memories surface like drowning gasps. Her mother's paranoia, the locked doors, the lessons in Old Realm, the way Master Kalen always watched the shadows. They're just stories. Stories don't send assassins. Skeldric rounds the table, stopping 3 feet away, close enough that she can see the exhaustion carved into his face, the 9 years of hunting shadows and protecting borders from threats no one believes exist. The poison at the feast, the explosion in the war room, those weren't Silas's people. They were cult operatives embedded in my court, trying to eliminate me so they could take you. Her knees unlock. She sits hard in the nearest chair before she collapses. You've known this whole time, since I crashed through your gates. I recognized your bloodline the moment I saw you. He crouches in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. You think I capture every refugee? You think I waste resources on runaway brides? I've been protecting you, Brisella. Keeping you imprisoned was the only way to hide you from a global death squad. By making me a prisoner. Her laugh is broken glass. How noble. By keeping you alive. His composure cracks for the first time since she's known him. The cult has operatives in every territory. Silas is just their latest puppet. If I'd granted you asylum publicly, announced your presence, they would have sent armies. So I made you my prisoner, made everyone believe you were just political leverage, kept you close where I could control who had access. The silence that follows tastes like ash and shattered illusions. The ancient Aegis, she whispers. What is it? A weapon, a shield. No one knows exactly. He stands, pacing to the window where he can see the horizon. But according to prophecy, only your bloodline can activate it. And if the cult gets you, they'll use you to wake whatever's sleeping beneath the northern mountains. Use you and kill you. And if they don't get me? She forces herself to stand, to face him across the war room. What happens then? He turns. Their eyes lock across 10 feet of ancient stone and terrible truths. Then you choose. Activate the Aegis willingly and potentially save the North. Or refuse and pray the prophecy is just paranoid fiction. Some choice. Her fingers find the knife at her belt. Reflex, habit, the only solid thing in a world that won't stop rewriting itself. You said we're both prisoners of destiny. What did you mean? His smile is bitter winter. The prophecy has a second clause. The one I didn't read you. He retrieves the scroll and points to the final line. The guardian cannot be controlled by the star alone. It requires the Wolf King's consent, his blood bound to hers, his will aligned with her sacrifice. Her pulse hammers in her ears. You. Me. He sets the scroll down with careful precision. So, when you asked what you are to me, you're not just an ally, Brisella. You're my only chance to stop the darkness that's been hunting me for 9 years, and I'm the reason you can never truly be free. Outside, war drums begin their countdown rhythm. 8 hours until Silas arrives. 8 hours until the cult makes its move. Brisella looks at the prophecy, then at the man who's been her captor and guardian, who lost everything and still fights, who's bound to her by fate neither of them chose. Then we rewrite the ending, she says. On the battlements, as Silas's army appears on the horizon, Brisella and Skeldric will make their stand. But the real enemy isn't the one they can see. I can really imagine the twist here. Do you? The first battering ram hits the iron gate at precisely dawn, and the sound is like the world splitting open. Brisella is already on the battlements, her stolen guard armor replaced with leather fitted to her frame, a real sword, not practice wood, heavy at her hip. Below, Silas's army spreads across the frozen plain like a plague of steel and fury. 3,000 warriors, maybe more. Their war banners snap in the wind, black wolves on crimson fields, and somewhere in that mass of violence and vengeance, Silas himself waits. The battering ram hits again. The gate shudders but holds. "Internal positions!" Brisella shouts, her voice cutting through the chaos of scrambling defenders. Thyra stands beside her, scarred and steady, watching the southern noblewoman who arrived broken and bloody, now commanding northern warriors like she was born to it. "Archers to the murder holes, pikemen to the secondary choke points. If they breach the gate, we funnel them into the killing corridor." The warriors move without hesitation. She's earned this, bled for it, trained until her hands went numb and her pride shattered. Now she's the one giving orders while Skeldric leads 300 heavy cavalry out through the northern sally port, preparing to flank Silas's exposed eastern wing. The ram strikes a third time, cracks spiderweb through ancient iron. "They're using cult magic," Thyra mutters, her eyes narrowed on the siege weapon below. No normal ram hits that hard. Brisella's hand tightens on her sword hilt. The prophecy wasn't paranoia. It was warning. How long until it breaks? 4 minutes, maybe 5. She turns to the archer captain, a grizzled veteran with more scars than teeth. "Target their ram operators. I want that weapon neutralized before—" The explosion tears through the gatehouse. Not the ram, something else. Fire and force erupt from inside the fortress walls, blowing the guard tower's eastern foundation into rubble and flame. Screams rise, warriors fall, and through the smoke and chaos, Brisella sees them. Black-robed figures emerging from the fortress itself, blades wet with the blood of guards who never saw the betrayal coming. The cult, inside the walls. "Traitors!" Thyra roars, already moving toward the breach with her sword drawn. "To arms! Defend the inner—" A crossbow bolt takes her in the shoulder. She goes down hard, blood blooming across her leathers. Brisella doesn't think. She charges, covering the distance in seconds, positioning herself between Thyra's fallen form and the black-robed cultist reloading his weapon. Her sword comes up in a guard position that's imperfect but functional. 60 hours of brutal training crystallized into muscle memory and desperate necessity. The cultist fires. She deflects. Barely. The bolt screams past her ear close enough to draw blood. Then she's closing distance, her sword finding his ribs with a thrust that's more momentum than skill. He goes down choking. She doesn't watch him die. No time. 3 more cultists are cutting through her archers, and below, the ram hits again, and somewhere beyond these walls, Skeldric is leading a charge with no idea his fortress is collapsing from within. "Fall back to the Great Hall," Brisella commands, hauling Thyra upright despite the woman's protests. "Barricade the main approach. We hold them at the throne room." "We can't abandon the gate. The gate is already lost." She grabs a fallen shield, pressing it into a young warrior's shaking hands. "We hold the interior, or we all die. Move." They retreat in controlled chaos, fighting for every corridor, every staircase. Brisella's sword arm burns. Her lungs scream. Blood, some hers, most not, soaks through her leathers, but she keeps moving, keeps directing warriors to defensible positions, keeps the line from breaking into panicked rout. The great hall doors slam shut just as the iron gate finally shatters. The sound echoes through stone like prophecy fulfilled. Through the hall's narrow windows, Brisella watches Silas's vanguard pour through the breach, a tide of southern steel and northern paid cultists flooding her temporary fortress. 200 warriors stand at her back, wounded but standing, trusting the runaway bride to keep them alive. 3 minutes, she whispers to herself, calculating distances and odds and the slim margin between survival and slaughter. Skeldric needs 3 minutes to realize and return. The throne room doors shudder under the first assault. Brisella positions herself at the center of the defensive line, sword raised, every muscle trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Beside her, Thyra grins. Through pain, her wounded shoulder hastily bound. "Not bad for a southern flower." "I'm a southern thorn," Brisella corrects, "and I'm about to draw a lot of blood." The doors explode inward. Silas enters like winter's cruelest promise, flanked by 20 elite guards and a dozen black-robed cultists whose eyes burn with zealot fire. He's exactly as she remembers. Tall, cruel, handsome, with a smile that's all sharp edges and the memory of her mother's breaking fingers. His gaze finds her across 30 feet of blood-stained stone. "Hello, little bride," he says, his voice carrying that familiar condescension that used to make her flinch. "I've come to collect what's mine." She doesn't flinch now, raises her sword instead. "I'm not your bride. I'm not your property. I'm the woman who's going to watch you die." His laugh is oil-slick charm. "Bold words for someone surrounded. Your Ice King is miles away, fighting a diversion. By the time he returns, you'll be bound and bleeding in my war tent, learning what happens to stolen things. Then come take me." She shifts her stance, weight balanced, sword steady despite the exhaustion threatening to buckle her knees. "But know this, every drop of blood you spill here, I'm carving from your hide personally." Silas's smile sharpens. He signals his guards forward. The battle becomes a blur of steel and survival. Brisella fights like Thyra taught her, ugly, desperate, effective. No elegant forms, just blocks and strikes and staying on her feet while warriors die around her. She takes a cut across her forearm, another along her ribs. A cultist gets past her guard, blade driving toward her heart. Thyra's sword takes his head off. 2 minutes, the guard captain grits out, blood running from her reopened shoulder wound. "Hold 2 more minutes." The throne room is chaos and screaming and the copper smell of spilled life. Brisella's defensive line is breaking. 10 warriors down, 15. Silas's forces pressing forward with numerical inevitability. She's being driven back toward the throne itself, the irony not lost. Cornered in the seat of the man who captured her, defending his kingdom like it's her own. Maybe it is. Silas breaks through her guard with a move she should have seen coming. His blade opens a gash across her shoulder that sends her sword clattering. She falls, hitting the dais steps, looking up at the man who tried to cage her soul, staring down with triumph carved into every line of his face. "The cult wants you alive," he says, reaching down to grab her hair. "But no one said undamaged. Let's start with—" The war horn shakes the fortress. Skeldric's cavalry crashes through what remains of the iron gate like an avalanche of northern fury and perfect timing. Through the broken throne room doors, Brisella sees him, mounted on his black war horse, armor splattered with enemy blood, pale eyes burning with something beyond rage as he takes in the carnage, the cultists. Brisella pinned beneath Silas's blade. Their eyes meet across the battlefield. 1 second, 2. Then Skeldric is moving, cutting through Silas's rear guard with mechanical precision and absolute violence, every strike bringing him closer to the throne room, closer to her, and Brisella uses the distraction to drive her knife, the ceremonial blade, Kaelin's final gift, straight up into Silas's inner thigh. He screams, stumbles back. She rolls away, reclaiming her sword with bloody hands. "Your 2 minutes are up," she tells him. And the Alpha King of the North explodes into the throne room like winter's final judgment. But as Silas falls, the cult reveals their true endgame, and Brisella must choose between the life she wanted and the destiny she never asked for. Brisella's blade finds Silas's throat 3 seconds before the cult's ritual reaches completion. The throne room is carnage and broken bodies, and the acrid smell of blood and burned ozone. Silas kneels before her, one hand clutching the wound in his thigh, the other reaching desperately for the cultist chanting behind him. Some ancient invocation meant to force the prophecy, to bind her bloodline through violence and stolen consent. But Brisella is faster. She steps through his weakened guard and drives her ceremonial blade home, right through the vocal cords that once commanded her obedience. His eyes go wide, disbelieving. The great Alpha Silas, brought down by the bride he tried to break. "This is for my mother," she whispers against his ear. "For Kaelin, for every woman you thought was decoration." He dies choking on his own authority. The cultist screams, his ritual fractured, and Skeldric's sword takes him before the sound finishes echoing. Around them, the battle's final moments play out in brutal efficiency. Northern warriors cutting down the last of Silas's elite guard, Thyra executing cultists with methodical precision despite her wounded shoulder, the fortress slowly returning to something resembling peace. Silence falls like snow after avalanche. 30 seconds. A minute. 2. Brisella stands over Silas's corpse, breathing hard, her entire body one massive bruise wrapped in blood-soaked leather. Her hands shake now that the adrenaline is fading. Her knees want to unlock, but she stays standing, stays solid, because falling apart is a luxury she'll afford herself later, alone, where weakness won't be weaponized. Skeldric approaches slowly, his pale eyes assessing her injuries with the focus of a man cataloging damage to something valuable. "You're hurt." "I'm alive." She sheathes the ceremonial blade, her fingers sticky with Silas's blood. "That's more than he can say." "The cult operatives are eliminated. My intelligence network is tracking the remaining cells." He stops 3 feet away, close enough to catch her if she falls, far enough to give her space. "You're free now, Brisella. Silas is dead. The forced mating contract died with him. You can go anywhere, be anyone." She looks at him. This man who captured her and protected her, who bound her with prophecy and offered her alliance, who stands covered in enemy blood after fighting through an army to reach her. And the ancient Aegis? The prophecy that says I'm the only one who can activate your kingdom's defense? His jaw tightens. That's not your burden to carry. It became my burden the moment I crossed your gate. She meets his winter storm eyes without flinching. But I won't be controlled by it. Not by prophecy, not by destiny, and not by you, no matter how noble your intentions. The silence between them could cut stone. I'm not asking you to be controlled, he says quietly. I'm asking to marry you. She sees it in his face, the calculation and the offer he's building toward. Bind our bloodlines, fulfill the prophecy, secure the North's defenses and your succession in one political alliance. He doesn't deny it. It would solve everything except my autonomy. She takes a step, closer, ignoring the pain screaming through her ribs. I didn't fight my way out of one cage to walk into another, even if this one comes with a crown and genuine respect. I won't be your queen, Skeldric. I won't be anyone's wife. That word tastes like my mother's broken fingers and Kaylin's severed head. His expression doesn't change, but something shifts behind his eyes. Understanding, maybe even relief. Then what will you be? She looks past him, through the shattered throne room doors, toward the southern horizon where her homeland waits. Leaderless now, vulnerable, requiring someone strong enough to rebuild it without repeating Silas's mistakes. I'll be what I was always meant to be, the ruler of the southern reach, not as your vassal, not as your dependent, as your ally. The South won't accept a woman ruler easily. The South will accept whoever has the strength to take it. Her smile is all edges and hard-won confidence. And I just killed their alpha in front of 300 witnesses. I'd say I've made my case. The corner of his mouth twitches, almost a smile. And the prophecy, the ancient aegis, we honor it without being enslaved by it. She extends her hand, not in surrender, not in submission, but in partnership between equals. I'll help you unlock the aegis when the time comes, but as an independent sovereign, not a bound consort, we'll forge our own treaty, one written by choice, not destiny. He stares at her offered hand for 5 heartbeats, then takes it, his grip firm and warm and carrying the weight of promises neither of them fully understands yet. The North recognizes the South's sovereignty and your rule, Lady Brisella. Queen Brisella, she corrects. I've earned the title. His rare, dangerous smile appears. Queen Brisella of the Southern Reach. May your enemies learn wisdom before they learn your blade. They stand there, hands clasped over Silas's cooling corpse, surrounded by the wreckage of the battle that bought them this fragile peace. Outside, the first snow of winter begins to fall. Warriors tend their wounded. Thyra barks orders to secure the shattered gate. And in the space between the North's ruthless king and the South's newly crowned queen, something settles. Not love. Not yet. But respect earned through blood and trust built from choosing each other despite every reason not to. Brisella releases his hand first. I'll need 3 months to stabilize the South, eliminate Silas's loyalists, establish new governance. And then we'll meet at the border, negotiate our alliance properly, as equals. She turns toward the door, her stride steady despite the pain, despite the exhaustion, despite everything. Try not to start any wars without me, Alpha King. Try not to topple any kingdoms without warning me first, Sovereign Queen. She pauses at the threshold, looks back over her shoulder. Their eyes meet one final time across the blood-stained throne room, and in that look passes everything they can't say yet, gratitude, possibility, the dangerous territory between allies and something more. Then she walks out into the snow, toward the southern gate, toward the territory that's now hers to claim. Free, unchained, unbroken. Behind her, Skeldric watches until she disappears into winter's embrace, his expression unreadable except for the smile that lingers like a promise of future complications. Comment your thoughts about this story and subscribe now as part of your great support towards the growth of the community we're building.